What's so great about her? Debbie has had a crush on Dan since she was 13. Dan was her father's close friend, Frank's son. And back in the days when they all used to live in the same town, Debbie would see Dan all the time. But they were never actually friends because Dan was older than her. And then they ended up parting ways when Debbie and her family moved to the city. But finally, after 3 years, when Debbie's father told her Frank had invited them to his farmhouse for a family vacation, she was super excited to spend the summer with her crush. After all, she wasn't 13 anymore. But after getting here, it suddenly clicked to Debbie that Dan wasn't a 16-year-old boy anymore either. Dan had just returned from his first year of college, and he brought along a, quote, female friend, Taylor. Hey Dan, you wanna go to the lake for a swim? For a swim? Yeah, right, he does. Say no, Dan. Say no, say no. Oh yeah. Come on, I don't think anyone's there. Debbie dropped her knife watching Dan and Taylor sneak off to do the worst she could imagine. But before Debbie could go after and mistakenly ruin the fun for them, her mother called out, "Debbie, can you grab the lemonade from the fridge?" Debbie sighed as she headed inside. Since they'd arrived, all she had been doing was helping out on the chores, while watching her crush flirt with his girlfriend. Debbie got the pitcher and returned to the picnic table to finish preparing the barbecue. But to her surprise, the table was empty. What happened to all the steak? Oh no, shouldn't have left it out here, dear. There are lots of wild animals around here. Must have took it away. Seriously? That was 1 hour's work. It's all right, dear. I'll help you out. That evening, thanks to Dan's dad, Debbie got the barbecue going and Dan and Taylor returned just in time to feast. So, Dan wrote me this song back when we met. Here it goes. Infant, 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 oh. Debbie snickered as Taylor sang the corniest song. She is such a bimbo. She gazed out at the stars, trying to block out her voice. When her eyes caught sight of something move in the woods. Was that a bear? All of a sudden, the karaoke party came to a stop when Debbie heard a noise from the other side. It was a strange old man. This has gone on for long enough, Frank. My car was broken into and my radio system stolen. Pay up. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but it wasn't us. Why would we? Of course. Out here in the middle of nowhere, I trashed my own car, isn't that right? I know it was you guys. And the day I catch you, I won't wait a second to call the cops. Who was that? Don't ask. Robinson, our neighbor. Lives across the woods. Cranky old man. Even his wife divorced him years ago. Never seen her since. He's been living alone and keeps putting the blame on me for every accident he has. That night, the parents all decided to head in. We're gonna camp out here, Dad, under the stars. Dan called out. All right, kids, be careful. As Debbie watched them from her room, she couldn't help the curiosity. What are they talking about? Where are they going? What are they doing? So, I've been noticing that girl Debbie keep looking at you. She's so weird. It's not new. She used to stalk me back when I was in high school too. Dan, did you hear that? Is someone following us? No, everyone's inside. Everyone except for Debbie. She had snuck out to spy on them. But now, afraid of getting caught, Debbie ran off into the woods to hide. Before long, she couldn't hear Taylor anymore. But suddenly, she realized she sort of lost her way too. Which way do I go now? Taking out her small pocket flashlight, Debbie tried to find some sign to lead her back home. When she was startled by a voice. "Stop! Don't move!" Debbie turned to see a woman and froze. If you went a little further, you would have fallen into the pit, and you wouldn't have been able to get out. Debbie turned around, shocked to notice a large crack along the ground. "What are you doing here? This isn't a safe place. Hurry and go back home." "But I don't know which way." "You're lost. Don't worry. You see these two trees? If you go straight down from this direction, you'll see a boulder. The farmhouse is to the left from there." "Thank you, but what are you doing out here?" "I don't live too far from here. Come on, I'll escort you." In the pitch darkness, Debbie followed the small ray of light from her flashlight and began walking. All she could hear was the sounds of the crickets, the owls, and her own footsteps. She had never felt this anxious before, but at least she wasn't alone. Debbie heard a noise behind one of the trees, immediately raising her flashlight. She yelled out, seeing a creepy man staring at her. "Sweet dear, what are you doing here?" Debbie shivered at the sight of his yellow, jagged teeth between his crooked smile. "Do you need help?" Debbie called, turning around to find the woman. But she was gone. "Oh, you saw her, didn't you? I've been trying to get a hold of her ever since I got here, but never been able to. But that's all right. At least tonight, I'll enjoy you." Hearing the man, Debbie immediately ran for her life. But soon, she was halted at the pit. What was she going to do now? "Stay away from me." "You can't run away from me tonight, sweetheart." But just as the man ran to get hold of her, Debbie moved away, and he slipped and fell straight into the pit. Wasting no time, Debbie ran back, following the trees, and soon reached the boulder. By the time she got home, everyone was out looking for her. "Debbie, thank goodness you're fine," her mother said in relief. But her father was more than furious. "What were you doing out in the woods? Who told you to go out at night? Don't you know how dangerous it is out there?" Debbie stuttered to explain herself when Frank calmly asked her, "My dear, I warned you so many times. It's like a maze out there. We've gone ourselves and gotten lost in daylight. How did you find your way back at this time? The only reason I'm alive is because of that woman. Woman? You met someone out in the woods? Not one, but two. Debbie explained everything that happened to her. I don't know where the woman went, and I don't know if the man is alive or dead, but he's in the pit. Hearing everything, Debbie's dad looked at Frank. We should call the police. It was almost 3 a.m. when the police arrived to the farmhouse, and with Debbie's help, reached the pit. The officers got in and inspected the man's body. He was no more. Officer Cavill, this is the man we've been searching for. Leatherface? Who is he, officer? He's been on the most wanted list for the past year. Ted Gein, convicted criminal and serial killer. Some years ago, when cops discovered his hideout, Ted Gein fled from the city. As he passed through this area, he found himself a safe haven in these woods. Since then, he had been surviving out here, building a makeshift hut and stealing supplies, clothes, and food from neighboring houses. Everyone was shocked and frightened hearing the police, but it was just then something even stranger happened. As the body of Ted Gein was pulled out of the pit, the police discovered something partially buried in the mud. It's another body. The forensic crew immediately got to work and uncovered the decaying body of what seemed to be a woman. As the body was exhumed, Frank fell silent, recognizing the dress and the jewelry. This is my wife, Suzanne. Officer Cavill turned to Debbie. You said a woman helped you out in the woods. What did she look like? She had dark hair, a mole by her eyebrow. She said she lived nearby. When Frank heard Debbie, he quickly took out his wallet and showed her a picture. Debbie, was this her? Yes, this is her. You saw Suzanne? The police took away the bodies for autopsies that night. Everyone was shaken by what happened. The last time I saw her was 14 years ago. They said she got lost in these woods and went missing. She was a good soul. Even after her death, she returned to help us. We're so sorry, Frank. No, I'm happy for her. Now she can rest in peace. As Frank wiped a tear, he suddenly realized the man they found, he had been living out here in the woods all this time, stealing and ruining our things. So this is why Robinson kept blaming me. He thought it was me while I thought it was him. Well, at least things have come to resolution now. It's nearly dawn. We should all get some rest. As everyone was heading in, Debbie suddenly remembered something. Totally forgot. Listen, when you return, go to the oak tree behind the farmhouse. There is a box buried beneath. Give it to Daniel. When Debbie was returning back, the woman had told her about a certain box, but Debbie was too overwhelmed to ask her anything. She quickly sneaked out to the oak tree, and with her pocket knife began digging, until she hit something hard. A geometry box? Debbie pulled out the tin box and opened it to find a letter inside. This is Suzanne Williams. I'm writing this, hoping perhaps one day someone will know the truth. My husband Frank recently bought this farmhouse, out here in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a choice but to move with my 5-year-old son Daniel. But now, I'm afraid, Frank has only brought us here to take my life. Almost 15 years ago, Frank and his wife Susan's relationship had begun to break apart. They would constantly be in fights and arguments. And in all this, Frank decided to move to this secluded farmhouse. But the new environment didn't bring about any change, because the intentions had already been made. Frank started to become physical with Susan, often hearing shouts and noises. His neighbor Robinson would spy on them. Poor woman, why doesn't she leave him? Robinson had never been too fond of Frank, knowing the way he treated his wife. And in all this, when he got news of Susan going missing, he immediately suspected Frank and informed the police. However, the police conducted a fruitless search and let go of Frank. Nonetheless, Robinson still doubted Frank and was enraged seeing him move on with his life. How can he be so normal after taking the life of his own wife? And in all this, when Ted Gein fled to these woods and began stealing from Robinson, Robinson naturally suspected Frank. But although Frank hadn't been the culprit behind the petty crimes, there was a far, grave secret he was hiding. Holding the letter, Debbie was shocked, learning the man, who she thought so highly of, had such a dark secret. It was Dan's dad who took the life of his mother?
Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.